Hello and welcome back to Adults Teens Need to Know Who Are You and What Do You Do? My name is Raisa, one of the hosts of APSO, and it's been a while, everyone. It has been a long time. We took a summer break, but we are back with our new upcoming authors because we are launching a new book called Wellness Wisdom 2. And today I have with me Dr. Fred Moss, who is one of the upcoming authors of Wellness Wisdom Volume 2. And today we're going to talk about his chapter, why he decided to become an author, and this awesome journey. So, Dr. Fred, thank you so much for joining me. You're looking great. How do you feel?
I feel fantastic. I'm just really, it's difficult times up there. It's challenging times up there. We're all going through a lot of changes and we're being asked to pivot. We're being asked to find a way to actually get ourselves reconnected with the world around us and to find something that is aligned with who we really are as people. So for those of us who are ready to do that, the opportunity to grow into being who you really are, speaking your real true self, and then walking into an aligned life is really available, even though I am quite certain that many people know that this is the most difficult time that we've had in our short life on earth.
I agree with you. And let's do that. Let's pivot. But before we even jump into pivoting into this environmental change, could you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Dr. Fred Moss, and I was, gosh, we could go back a long ways. We could go back to 1958 when I was born, if you want. And I was born into a family that was a fair amount of chaos and disarray. And there was an opportunity for me to arrive on this earth and actually bring joy and connection to a population, my two siblings and my two parents, that was in this chaos. So when I popped out, that's what I saw my job to be. So I hit the time clock, and I haven't hit the time clock to go out yet. My opportunity is really to stand for people to connect, to find their true self, and then to communicate with each other. I remember as a child, I used to watch the four of them speak, and I just was so amused and entranced with communication as a way of connecting with each other. And I just wanted to be a communicator. And over all of my life, that's what I learned how to do. Now, mostly it was in the world of speaking. But I think as we touch in this today, there's another half that really is maybe even much more powerful than speaking. It's very, very important when people are communicating. And that's the role that you're taking right now, and maybe some of the audience is taking right now. And that's in the world of listening. Because without listening, speaking is kind of hopeless and useless. And listening is a skill. It's not what we do in between when people talk. It's what we do to actually hear, what is that person trying to communicate? What is that person expressing? How can I move the needle forward through my listening? And so who I've become over time, I was a physician. I am a physician. I'm a doctor. I eventually went into psychiatry so I could learn how to communicate.
Right.
But as we all know, because psychiatry shifted over the years. When I first applied to be a psychiatrist, it was a communication field. 30 years later, it's no longer a communication field. It's where you go when communication doesn't work. You go to a psychiatrist and you actually expect to get prescriptions and medications and not necessarily any kind of connection. So I've kind of pulled myself out of the industrial, the common conventional industrial medical complex. And I've become a listener again. I've become a healer again, someone who actually walks people into their optimized life, whether they're in transition, whether they want to start a podcast, or my most recent focus, which is actually helping healers heal. So healing the healers is my new focus. People who are finding themselves like I did outside of the roles of what they thought they were getting into and wondering how to do whatever they're going to do next.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Thank you.
I love that so much. And as we're talking about communication, Dr. Fred, could you agree that not only listening, but the written communication is very important?
Oh, it's really great that you asked that. Of course, it's true. And, there's something about, here's the thing, the key difference is that when we speak, our words disappear.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
Right? Like when you and I are talking, you think you hear what I'm saying, it gets incorporated, you think you respond in whatever way you do, And not more than usually a minute or two later, the words that I spoke are gone. You can't go get them again. Now, in this case, of course, with electronic help, this is being recorded and streamed and maybe even transcribed. But what is transcription? Transcription is the written word, and that can actually last the test of time.
Right.
And not only that, we get to refine and redesign what we write. You don't have to hit send after you write those 4 angry words to your friend. You can actually go, oh, I'm so glad I didn't say that. Let me try this another way. You can revise it. You can edit it. You can make it right. You can sit on it for a day.
You can delete it.
Exactly. You can delete it.
Mm-hmm.
You can delete a rung bell. And when we speak, it's a bell rung. And, we can't delete what we say, but we can indeed, with the help of the written word, whether that's, again, now you're speaking to the electronically written word, like the typed word.
Mm-hmm.
You're too young to remember that we used to actually write with a pen and paper. And
oh my God, I am way too young to remember that one. What is a pen?
It's like the thing that's sort of like a laser, sort of like a laser pointer. You guys understand that? It's sort of like that, but it actually has a little, like a drip of ink or lead on the far end, and when you rub it up against paper, it actually leaves mark, and you can write on those things.
Of course. Yeah. And Dr. Fred, so as we're talking about the power of written word, we can delete it, we can redefine it, we can edit it. Mm-hmm. You are about to be, and you are right now, an upcoming author. And as we're talking about typing, not the pen, I'm a little too young to understand that one. But just kidding. But typing it out and having the electronic word, what was that like for you? Why did you decide to, have your own testament in this book and around the lines of listening?
Well, it is around the lines of listening, and it's the sound of listening, I believe. We're really looking at what is it that we do inside of communication that best gets our expression and message to the other person.
Right.
So, when this book opportunity came my way, it was a no-brainer, really. It was meaning that I've written several pieces about communication in my life, but maybe my most favorite piece is the one that eventually got refined and put into this book. This whole idea of the sound of listening, this whole idea of really making a difference through listening. And the expansive nature of what listening is what the chapter really points to. So it's the opportunity to maybe give it some eternity, to give it some permanence, to actually write. And we say, like as if we're saying something through writing. We're not saying anything. We're writing and communicating and connecting through the written word. And this, we're looking for better ways to actually heal, wise ways to heal the world. The written word and listening are probably two of the most important ways. And I think that the chapter really accentuates that adequately.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, it is the combination of both of them there. I hear that you continue to talk about healing as it's a very big part of your journey and your work. So through the art of listening, how can we heal the healers?
Okay. So yeah, the idea here, it's a great question. If we start seeing that really the one thing that people want, and I'm talking 7.8 billion people. I'm not talking guys that most people. I'm not talking about young people. I'm not talking about Americans or North Americans, I'm just talking about 7.8. The entire human population really wants to be heard. They really want to be self-expressed. They want to be listened to. So when you really start looking at, healing, what I get is when I first got my first job, I dropped out of college a couple times. And the second time I dropped out of college, I was never, ever, ever going to go back. And I got a job my mom got me an application, and I got a job as a child care worker at a state mental health facility. As I mentioned already, when I was born, I became so curious and interested about the idea of how to communicate.
Right.
And the job at the mental health facility finally had me communicating and getting like paid a little bit for it. So these kids were 6 or 8 years younger than me, and all I had to do was go in the afternoon and have these great conversations with these wonderful human beings who were state mental health, like adolescent boys. And what happened, what I noticed, was that we both healed, and we would heal whenever we would connect.
Interesting.
Right? When you feel heard, when you feel that someone's connected to you, is there a greater sense of peace and ecstasy than that very moment when that experience is realized? I say no. I say, in fact, all healing depends on human connection. And human connection depends on listening. What about the people out there who seem to not care who's hearing them? Well, guess what? They all just want to be heard too. Or the people who don't, who pretend not to care about what anyone else says. You know what they want? They want to be heard too. Everyone really just wants to be heard. And why am I talking about hearing so much? Because when we truly listen to another, we open the space for healing that otherwise would never be made available. When I step into healing the healer, what I'm really talking about is a group of healers
right.
who find themselves outside of their original plans to deliver health to others. Maybe they're no longer doctors, no longer nurses, or maybe they're thinking of leaving their position in the clinic. Why are they doing that? Because it's no longer aligned with their truest self. They're being asked to do things that are not aligned with how they know healing should go. So they're left either miserable or looking for a new position, a new job, either in the healing field, or maybe just saying goodbye to the healing field and going off to be a creative artist or to be a barista or to, support somebody else in the world.
Because there's that connection piece to it. So if we think about the terms, or more of the, like, as people are learning to kind of self-diagnose and find quote unquote red flags in communication and relationships, when you hear about the terms like emotional dumping or ranting or not giving space to someone to ask if they're even in that mental space to listen to what you're saying, how do you combat that, or how do you kind of communicate that you want to be heard? Does that question make sense?
Can you try it again? Please run it by me. I'd love to answer it. Yeah. I think I did, but let's make sure I'm clarified here.
Yeah, of course. So when we as you're talking about listening to someone gives you connection. Yes. And when you have connection, you can heal. Yes. So when we hear people use terms like emotional dumping, how does that differ from actual listening? And how does that differ from healing? Like, should we get rid of those terms? Should we not really mind them and just listen to people all the time? Or should we continue to consider these terms?
Yes. So again, it's such a great question, and it lies within the whole notion of listening. So when I ask you to repeat yourself, what am I efforting to do? I want to make sure that I'm hearing you.
Okay. Yes.
Make sure that I'm hearing you. I want to make sure that I'm listening. And if I would have answered the first time, I was pretty sure that I would not be able to directly answer whatever your inquiry was. Even now, as I listen to this idea of emotional dumping, I'm only marginally familiar with the concept. So, when we talk about it, I think what you're really saying, or maybe the question is answered like this: no one's ever gotten into trouble listening to another person.
Oh, and wow. That's a direct quote right there.
It's absolutely true. You can't get in trouble listening to another person. Now, we think we do. We can get sparked. We can get triggered We can have, we can have some very difficult experiences when we hear someone say or watch someone do a particular thing, but that's us.
Hmm.
Not what they said. What they said and what they did, you don't get into trouble listening to another person. It's actually probably the most, for like, return on investment. There's nothing with a higher return on investment than being able to listen to someone, and especially to somebody who might disagree or diametrically oppose what it is you think about a particular issue. And these days, of course, we have these divisive issues out here where you
Right.
might think quite a bit differently about something, even than someone you know and love. In the world of listening, whether if someone is, again, I am assuming I understand what you mean when you say the concept of emotional dumping. What's here to be had is that it's not a matter of allowing someone to insult the daylights out of somebody or just to have, verbal diarrhea. That's not what we're really talking about. What
Right.
we're talking about is listening for what is actually being communicated, and how can I, in the listening of this other person or people, actually move the needle forward so that I can contribute to making a positive difference in the world. Those are the kind of things that I'm asking when I'm listening to another person. I'm doing my best in this fairly long speeching communication.
Right.
Address what you're saying so that I can move this conversation's needle forward. That's what all there really is to do.
Hmm. And thank you for, answering that question and taking the time. I think that was a really great example of what you're saying, to move conversations forward by understanding each aspect of what the other person is saying, or in this case, asking the question. And
Exactly.
when we, in your chapter, I think it's called the silence sound of listening. Sorry.
Mhm. That's
Uh,
right.
Around that. So in that chapter, I think you had mentioned that you at a rock concert, it had, punctured your hearing, and you had to find new appreciation and new acceptance. And as a psychiatrist as well, how do you teach people to create acceptance and appreciation in their life?
Well, yeah, it was a Bruce Springsteen concert, a great concert. I'm a big fan of Bruce, and I was there in Indianapolis, and I noticed that at one point during one of his late songs, I felt something. And it's like, oh, I'm not hearing as good as I was just a second ago.
Mhm.
And I've been to a lot of rock concerts, so over time, I've probably had my hearing invaded and insulted many, many hundreds of times. But this one felt like it might be serious, and it turned out that it did take a little chop in my hearing capacity. I eventually ended up getting hearing aids, but in the meantime, what I really learned before I got hearing aids is
Mhm.
that you don't even know what you can't hear.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
You can't know unless someone can hear it next to you, it just appears to be silent.
Mhm.
So, like, if there's a bus that's going out in front and I don't hear it, I don't know that I didn't hear it. I don't know that. I only know it if you say, "Hey, I wonder why there's a bus out front." I'm like, "How do you know?" Because we
Mhm.
just heard it. We don't know what we don't know, and we can't hear what we don't hear. We don't have an internal capacity to understand what we can't listen to,
Okay.
right? We don't know what we miss. We don't know what we're missing. So I had patients and my kids specifically tell me after during those years after the hearing loss, that I wasn't listening, or that I couldn't hear the buzz of my computer, or my kids would end up talking louder to me. And I said, you don't have to do that. And they go, yes, we do, Dad. And it's like, and then I got hearing aids. But what I learned over time is that I'm not going to give away the essence of the chapter, but at
Mhm.
point, I realized that there's musicians out there, for instance, who
Right.
created music without even knowing. Like if you look at Beethoven, he created music without even never heard his own symphony. That's just ridiculous, right?
Right.
And there's an opportunity to actually hear and listen, even without it coming through your ears. Like there's an opportunity to be with someone and actually understand and even take in what they're saying and how they're saying it without having necessarily to pay very much attention to the content. So in the context, we have a capacity to really accept and listen to another person. Let me tell you another experience which just happened. I guess it just happened on either Monday or Sunday of this week.
Mm-hmm.
I was in, as I told you, I just finished Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins for the last 6 days. Extraordinary course.
Hey.
Super amazing course, right?
Mm-hmm.
At one point Tony was doing this intervention on this Taiwanese woman who was at home. And she was talking about how she had some troubles with her mother and her mother wasn't taking, that there was an ongoing conflict and friction. And then she began to realize that she hadn't given her mother credit for being such a beautiful mom over the years.
Ah.
Tony made her pick up the phone and call her right in front of all 6,000 of us. What do you mean? And he says, yeah, call her. Because by the time she got to that she loved him, that she loved her, Tony wanted her to actually give it to her. Well, we didn't know that mom only speaks Mandarin. And so she got on the phone, she got on her cell phone, and she called Taiwan. Mom answered the phone speaking Mandarin. And we listened to the two of them have this most beautiful conversation. And we couldn't understand a word of what she was saying. Not really.
Right.
I need to tell you, Rachel, I heard every word she was saying. And so did all of us. We feel love. We could feel the connection. We could feel the questioning. Mom was worried there was something wrong with her. Why would she be calling in the middle of the day? Like what's happening? And mom needed to be assured. And we could hear that. We could hear her. We could watch her and see exactly what she was trying to communicate, even though she didn't speak one note of English.
Wow.
The listening is such a broad area. And when we get that we don't have to dissect each and every word, a new, broader sense of listening becomes available so that you can get people. You can actually resonate and harmonize with people. You can connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
A level of listening that maybe you've never even tried before. And guess what happens when you listen to someone at that level?
You have connection. Ah, there we go. Nice.
Yeah.
Connection, healing.
And healing.
So how do we do that though? If we're, if we are in that situation, she was pushed by Tony Robbins to make that decision. But if we were to make that individual decision for everyone that we meet or our family and friends, how would we do that?
Well, again, one of the things that happened in this particular interactions, which can't be overlooked, is she listened to Tony. Tony's really easy to listen. I don't know if you know anything about Tony, but Tony's pretty damn easy to listen to. In fact, it's impossible not to hear him when he speaks.
I mean, in front of 6,000 people, of course you're going to do it.
Yeah, there's that. So she listened. And, how do you do it? This is not an inside job. This is not a one-person job. Listening requires at least 2 people. And you have to care. You have to care. You have to desire. You have to create. You have to want something. You have to want to communicate. You have to want to have a conversation. You have to want, through your own curiosity and presence, to make a difference in a conversation so that listening can lead to connection, and then that naturally leads to healing.
Wow. This is so good. Thank you, Dr. Fred. Thank you. We have people in here. We have BB saying hello. Hello, BB. I'll leave that up there. We have Latifa here saying hi. If you are enjoying this, please comment. If you have any questions for Dr. Fred, please comment them as well, and we can have questions that he can answer as for this chapter and this conversation as well. Dr. Fred, in your coaching practice as well, and do you feel like after writing this chapter, you'd like to write more on listening? Since
That's
it's such a
the question. So right through the Tony Robbins 15-hour a day date with destiny, I wrote every single day into my newsletter. And I wrote about healing healers. And much of it was really about listening. The whole idea of listening, and, two or three entries ago, I wrote about listening to me. I wrote about meeting myself when I was 5, and then meeting myself again when I was 12, and then 16, and then 21. Meeting these 4 characters and like actually meeting them, seeing my 5-year-old, seeing my 9-year-old, 16 and 21, totally different. They appear to be totally different in the world. And having a conversation with them and letting them know what I now know, that everything's going to be okay, that they did fine, that all the stuff that they were doing were in target and aligned with who that I was eventually going to become at 64 and a half years old. And, it was a beautiful conversation that I had with the little 5-year-old, little Freddie, and a really great conversation with the 9-year-old bicycle riding Fred. And then with amazing conversation with that little rebel 16-year-old Fred. And then the 21-year-old, young adult trying to figure out what was important and what isn't. The 5 of us got together, and through the listening of what was really there, guess what happened to me? I was able to connect to all of myself, all these, the big thread. And through that, a greater sense of healing took place through listening. And so much of my newsletter, and so frankly, everything I'm doing these days, I like to talk, right? I think I mentioned I like to talk. And I learned to talk very young, mimicking my brothers and my parents. But it's only in the last, 8 or 10 years that the power, the actual extraordinary, magical, mystical power of listening has become more available to me. And now I know that without listening, speaking doesn't worth a darn. So, yeah.
Very. When you have this desire to want to be listened to, or to have that conversation, to have that communication, I'm sure, have you heard of like how to win friends and family, or how to influence? When you see all these tactics to influence people, do you buy those tactics?
Some of them are done so well that we don't even have a voluntary choice of whether or not we buy the tactic. You turn on your computer, you're about to be, have tactics sprung on you, strategies to grab. The most important thing these days is your attention. And, every so often I, like everyone else, I pick up this device and I find myself just, scroll. It's like, it takes some kind of effort to get out of it. Some of it is so interesting or so compelling. It's kind of usually not that interesting that I just keep scrolling, looking for the next cool piece. Right. So the strategies and the tactics that people use, or that companies use, or that bots use to grab our attention, it isn't a matter of whether we buy it. It's a matter of choosing when and how to listen. So, for instance, one of the places to listen might be outside in nature. Just yesterday, or it might have even been this morning when I think of it, there's a little tree out there. I'd be glad to show you, but it would take too much work to move the computer. It's actually a big tree. And there was a big hawk sitting on the highest part of the tree.
Okay.
I saw him from the window, and then I went outside to bring the garbage cans in. And when I went outside, he started making hawk noises. It's like, dude, you sure have something to say. And he was like just bellowing these hawk noises, right? And then after I was done listening to him, I could hear a dog bark over there. I could hear a car move over there. I could hear the rustling of the trees or the leaves. And it was something like, oh, listen what happens when I open up my listening that has nothing to do with scrolling on a cell phone. So our listening is a tool, and we have some capacity to choose what we listen to and what we don't. We're losing that capacity over time, and that has me very concerned about the future of humanity. Because if we can't choose what we hear or listen to, and then we also choose not to express ourselves freely, then I don't know, the future's pretty grim. And that's
Looking dim, yeah. No, you're right. And but this is why we have these conversations, and this is why we choose to communicate either through speaking, listening, and through the written word, as being a part of this book and collaborating with other people, because it's that kind of effort that gives a little bit hope for the future,
yeah.
right? Making it a little bit brighter. So we have Bibi here. She comments, 100% definitely love it. Love it. Healing is all about listening and wanting to make you
Make
wanting you can be reached to the hearts of loved ones.
yeah.
And then she also says, I enjoy listening to all of our seniors. They have the best advice for healthy healing through their experiences in life.
Yeah. So she might be including me in this list of seniors. And I'm not a senior yet. I have a new definition of senior. It's like people who are older than me.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
That's it. And the truth is, I'm not afraid to be, I'm kind of kidding. I'm not afraid to be old, and I'm not afraid to be older. The truth is, I have had such an extraordinary life, and indeed have such a vast array of experiences in my life. So I'm allowed to bring my wisdom. I'm allowed to pour it back. I'm allowed to be sage-like. I'm allowed to, really bring my experience in my past forward. And if that somehow affects people who are wondering or who are learning through what I say, well, there's no greater honor. And I do appreciate Bibi's comments. Thank you, Bibi.
Amazing. And Dr. Fred, as we're kind of wrapping up here, what are some of your plans for after the book?
Well, after the book, I've written a couple courses. I have this course called True Voice, the True Voice course, and you can find that at truevoicecourse.com. It's a beautiful course that I've written with, has 6 modules and 18 lessons and 54 prompts, and really walks people into where they've been inside of sort of the default nature of not speaking their true voice or saying what they need to in order to survive. Really finding through creativity and through some very cool exercises, self-reflective and with other people, what is their true voice, and then delivering it effectively into the world, often through podcasting. The next chapter that I'm doing with my life that I mentioned is Healing Healers. So the next course that I'm writing is called Healing the Healers. My newsletter is called Healing the Healers. And my focus these days is really helping people who can identify themselves as healers, who for whatever reason are muffled or, they're stopped, they're muzzled, they're muted, they're censored, they're afraid. These people who don't know what to do with their life now that their first efforts to be healers have run up against an obstacle, a brick wall of nature. So, right. So who I'm now aiming for is really not only writing more, because I do love to write, but actually creating a course and then creating a coaching program and a mastermind that adequately addresses healers who are now outside of the system or almost outside of the system, and help them realign with their truest voice and then go back into healing again, whether that's through the performing arts or the visual arts or becoming a barista or coming back into the medical field and being effective. So I'm focused on healing healers these days.
I love that. Oh my gosh. And how can we reach out to you?
Well, I can be found on social media. So there's, I don't like Facebook, but it is a place you can find me. And that's Dr. Fred Moss or Dr. Fred Moss, MD. Another way you can find me, I like LinkedIn. And so LinkedIn and some of the social media is Instagram and Twitter as well. But LinkedIn's my favorite. And if you really want to get a hold of me, the best way to do it is to email me. And in that email, it's Dr. Fred, drfred at welcometohumanity.net. It's to welcometohumanity.net. It's self-explanatory, right? Like each and every experience that we're having is a beautiful experience of life. So actually gracefully accepting and then loving everything that life has to offer, even if it's effing miserable. Mm-hmm. Like really getting, you know what? You got one life. This is part of it. This is part of it. There's some deep miserable things happening in this world or in your life. and maybe seeing them as a challenge, as a worthy opponent to moving forward in your life. So my goal at this point is to really focus down on helping people find their true voice and deliver it effectively, helping people use their creative skills to heal through self-expression, and finally helping healers specifically get back to whatever it is their mojo, the healing that they know they really are.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Fred.
My
Um,
pleasure.
as he said before, you can find him on all socials, but if you really want to get in contact with him, make sure you email him. And we'll be putting that into our description a little bit later in the video and the recording, and we'll also have it up on Instagram. Thank you so much, Dr. Fred, for joining us today and for also being our first person again since our little break. This has been an absolutely mesmerizing conversation that I think is going to benefit a lot of people and bring a lot more brightness into our world, which is what we're all about. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to those who have commented and joined our conversation as well. We hope to see you next time. And make sure that you stay tuned because Wellness Wisdom is coming out this December. It's going to be a nice Christmas gift if you celebrate Christmas and just a nice winter holiday gift as well. I'm Raisa, and this has been hosted by APSO, awesome people shaping our world. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.